Welcome everyone, it's time for Talk of the Town. We're going to be joined by a couple of our news partners today. We'll be talking with Medicine Shop Pharmacy in Monona and also the South Central Library System. Finally, we'll be joined today by our friends from Swift Waters TV. But first, we've got our news partner, Steve Benzschawel from Wisconsin Business World. Welcome, great to see you again.
Good to see you too, thanks for having me.
Always good to have you on. I'm super excited to talk about this topic today. But first, let's give everybody a quick reminder, what's Business World?
Yeah, so Business World's a program for high school kids, and I travel all around Wisconsin. I work with about 2,000 high school kids every single year.
Very impressive.
And what's fun now is I'm starting to see the business community, a lot of our business sponsors even, reach out and want to know a lot about that next generation. A lot of those kids are starting to be their youngest employees now, and they're really trying to figure out how to best manage and motivate this new generation.
Absolutely, because all of your Business World students, they're part of the millennial generation. So you and I were kind of talking about it a little bit before we were on air, but let's give everybody some background on what makes the millennial generation so different in the workforce.
Sure, so the millennials, and maybe the viewers have heard that word being thrown around a lot, it's kind of in the news lately. So these are the kids from the 80s and 90s that grew up with technology, very digital, very connected, and they think about the world, they see things in a much different way than other generations, and it started to kind of create some conflict in the workplace because we all kind of see the world differently and go about our work in new ways.
Absolutely, and hopefully that conflict can kind of be channeled into a good positive thing with a work environment with a lot of different perspectives, and we need to learn how to get there, so people are beginning to come to you to ask for that advice.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the common millennial stereotypes or the conflicts that you do see in the workplace.
Sure, so some of the stereotypes that you'll kind of hear, and they're not always the most positive things, right? A lot of the times you'll hear that millennials are maybe spoiled or kind of entitled. And I think that that stereotype comes from how we were raised. And the way that we were raised is a lot different than other generations compared to, say, our grandparents' generation.
Certainly.
So one of the things that we see in the millennials as kids is they had a lot of structure and a lot of support. So we had parents, teachers, coaches that
Very
played
involved
a
with us.
huge part of our life. And we're always there for us, kind of coaching us along and looking over our shoulder, telling us, you're doing great, keep it up. So when we come into the workplace now as millennials, we kind of expect that to continue. We don't think that that's
all
going
that
to
positive
change.
feedback and encouragement.
So corporate America will kind of say, well, these darn millennials, they need constant feedback, and we're not used to that. We're not used to that level of having to give you that much immediate response. But as a millennial, we're used to that. We're used to that. So on the corporate side, we try to encourage them to meet them halfway. That a lot of feedback's a good thing. Kind of makes you sure that I'm going in the right direction with this project.
Absolutely, and of course, make sure that their managers, their supervisors, that way they are giving feedback and they're able to ensure that the work that the millennials producing is right on track with what they want. So there can be some positive outcomes potentially from this.
Yep.
One of the other stereotypes that I've heard a bit is the job hopper stereotype. Maybe that they're not staying with one employer for a long time.
Sure. So that one is really neat, and there's some truth to it. Millennials do tend to move around. They have more mobility than other generations. One of the neat things, if you really look at that, is if we think about 20 or 30 years ago, so maybe look back to, again, our parents or our grandparents' generation. By the time you were 30 years old, you were probably married if you wanted to. You probably had kids, and you probably had a house, a mortgage. So those are three things that really make you put roots down in your community.
You get very settled, very solidified.
And if you all of a sudden wanted to move now, your spouse has to leave his or her job. You got to pull your kids out of school from their friends. You got to find a new place to live. You got to sell your house. But if you're a millennial, if you're a millennial, you don't have any of those concerns. Moving to San Francisco sounds fun.
Yeah.
Moving down to
Chicago.
Chicago.
Exciting new adventure.
Sleep on my friend's couch till I find a job. You bet. So very different life stages.
Yeah.
Kind of a delayed adulthood.
The timeline for life has really changed. From millennials. To when their parents and their grandparents. I remember my grandmother telling me that by 23, people were calling her an old maid because she wasn't married. And I'm like, well, so it's a very different world. And things are happening at a totally different rate. And obviously it makes sense that that's going to affect, the workplace.
Yep.
So let's talk quick before we go about how a company can best attract and then keep those millennials happy and keep them working and at that same company.
Yeah. So really quickly, there's nothing you can do to get around the fact that millennials might move around. The mobility isn't going to go away because of those roots that we talked about earlier.
Just kind of a fact of life
haven't
there.
put those down. But what you can do is create an environment where those millennials feel like they're thriving. We talked about the coaching and the support that millennials are used to. So as a young person, if I'm working somewhere and I feel like I've got a mentor that I can go to. I feel like I'm kind of growing professionally. I can go to that person for whatever I need, and I'm in a place where I'm supported and I feel like I'm valued and contributing. You know, you don't need to put a ribbon about me up on the wall, but making me feel like I'm important here and I'm a valuable member of the team. You're way more likely to keep those millennials for longer than you ordinarily would have.
I love that, and it sounds like, you know, millennials, they like mobility, but it's possible that they can get that kind of forward mobility in their same company as long as they feel like they're thriving and growing and moving forward within that same organization.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really good tie-in and a very important thing for business owners to remember. So this is a great topic. I'm really glad we were able to touch on this today, Steve.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Once again, we've got Steve Benzschawel from Wisconsin Business World, and we'll be right back with more Talk of the Town, so stay tuned.